Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. If you are new to the channel, I want to say welcome. If you are a reoccurring visitor, welcome back. For this tutorial, we're going to look at databases, or we're going to handle databases on Linux, and the database we're going to work with is MySQL. So for this tutorial, we're going to get very hands-on. We're going to connect to a server. We're going to build database. We're going to create tables, put data into the tables, and we're doing all of that on the Linux system. So this topic is going to be a wide topic, so I'm going to do several videos on that specific topic. So for the beginning, or for this specific video, this is going to be the introduction to running databases on Linux. So the first thing you want to do, you want to head over to Google and download Node.js. We're going to say install Node.js, and you go over and we're going to choose our environment. So for me, I'm using a Mac, so I'm going to click on the Mac installer. And once that is finished downloading, we're going to install it on our system. So we're going to open the package and click on continue, agree, install. And then I'm going to enter my password, press OK, and let it download. So once we are done, we're going to click on close. We're going to move this to trash. We're going to open up the terminal and install the MySQL CLI. And to install the MySQL CLI, we're going to use npm. And that's why we downloaded Node.js, so we can use the npm command. So we're going to say npm install -g, and we want SQL-CLI. We hit enter, and it's going to download the CLI for us. If you do get an error when you are downloading the SQL CLI, maybe you can start your command. So before npm install, you can use sudo npm install -g SQL-CLI. We're going to go over to the SQL page to download MySQL server. So you can just type into Google MySQL server, or you can go over to dev.mysql.com/downloads/MySQL. And once you get on this page, choose your OS. I'm using Mac, so I'm going to go ahead and choose Mac. And for the Mac users, you have to be very careful which one you choose from here. So the ARM version, that's for the Mac users with the M1 chip. And if you are using the Intel or the older chip, which is the Intel chip, then you will go ahead and you will choose this option. So I'll choose this option, and then I'm going to download the DMG. I'm going to say no thanks, just start the download, and I'm going to wait till it's finished. So once the download is completed, we're going to click on the download and we're going to install it. Just follow the instructions, click allow and continue, agree, and install. We're going to click on next. This section, or this part, is very important. What they're asking for is a password for the root user, and that password, you would have to use it every time you log into MySQL server. So create a password that you can remember. So I'm going to create my password, and I'm going to hit finish. Then you have to enter your password so it can finish installing. So just remember, you have to save that password that you just input into the system, because again, you will need it when you're logging into the MySQL server. So I'm going to go ahead and press close. Yes, I want to move it to trash, and this part is complete, so we can go ahead and close this off. Go into settings and you scroll down to the bottom. We have MySQL here, so you're going to click on it and make sure you're connected to the server. If you scroll down and you do not see MySQL, most likely you would have to restart your computer. If you look at the main page for MySQL, you would see that we are currently active or connected to the SQL server. If it's not connected, you will see something here said start MySQL server, and you just click on it, it will start running for you. So let's go back into the terminal, clear the screen. And what we need to do now, we want to find the path where MySQL is located. 90% of the time, your SQL file will be stored in the user/local folder. So let's see if the file is inside of the local folder. To find your local folder, you can use ls/usr/local, and we have the MySQL in the local folder. So let's copy this path and let's run the same command again, but this time we're going to put slash and we're going to paste. We do have the bin in there. We actually need that path to do some configuration in VI. So let's copy this whole line and let's paste it, and this time we're going to say /bin. So this is where the MySQL files are located. So what we want to do, we want to open up VI. So first let's copy this whole line. Do not copy the ls part. We only want to copy from /user. So we're going to copy this line. We're going to use VI and we want to go inside of the .shenv file. So we're going to say .zshenv, and that file would give us access to set some path. So to set the path, we're going to use the export keyword or the export command. So we're going to say export path. So we're going to set the path for the MySQL file. The path is going to equals to $ curly brackets, and inside of the curly brackets we're going to say path : and then we're going to paste the path where the SQL files are located. So we're going to hit escape : WQ to save and quit, and now we successfully saved the path. We have to restart our computer. I'm going to stop the recording, restart the computer, and start back the recording. I have resetted my computer. I hope you reset your computer as well if you want things to run properly. So I'm going to go ahead and clear my terminal, and then the command to start the SQL server is MySQL -u, and then we're going to put root because root is you, the owner of the computer, and then -p. So when you start, it's going to ask you for a password, and remember the password you created when you were downloading MySQL to your computer. So that's a password you have to enter right now to get access to the MySQL server. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my password, and now we inside of the MySQL server. So the first thing we want to know when we log into the SQL database, we want to see what type of database are on the system. So in order for you to do anything on your system, you would have to do it inside of a specific database. So let's check the database on the system, and to do that we're going to say show databases. And for SQL statements or SQL queries, you must end your query with a semicolon to let the system know, or to let the server know, that you finish writing your command or you finish writing your statement. So if I hit enter, it will go to the next line, which is prompting me or telling me I must use a semicolon. So let's add our semicolon. And now we can see all of the database that is currently on the system. So we have the information schema, MySQL, performance schema, and we have sys. Now to get out of the MySQL server, all you have to do is use the command exit, and we are out of the system. To get back into the system, you do the same step, MySQL -u root -p. So let's go ahead and hit enter. Then we're going to enter our password, and we're back in the system again. When you are a DBA, you don't want everything to be on one database. You may want to create a database, let's say for the accounting department. You may want to create a different database for the sales department. You may want to create a different database for the finance department. So let's create a database called test. To create a database, we use the create command. So we can say create database test. And when I hit enter, this is going to create a database in my system called a test. So query OK. So that means the database was created. Let's go back and use the show databases command. And you see at the bottom, we have our test database created. If you are the administrator, someone new got hired for the company, let's say in the finance department or in the test department, the DBA would have to create a user or have to create an environment for me to do some work. So to create a user, we use the create command. So we can say create. By the way, you don't have to use uppercase, you can use lowercase. A lot of the DBAs or programmers use uppercase, and uppercase differentiate what is the system command from your command or your input. Create user, and the user I want to create is Nikki, and I'm going to say identified by, and inside of the single quotes you have to give a password for Nikki to use every time she logs into the system. So the password I'm going to use is PWD uppercase N I KKI. So this command is used to create a user. I'm going to hit enter, and it's asking for my semicolon, so I'm going to add my semicolon, and the query was okay. So we just created a user Nikki on the system. So let us exit the program and log back in as Nikki, the new user we just created. So we're going to say exit, and it says bye. So let us clear the screen. Instead of root, we're going to use the new user we just created. We hit enter, it's going to ask us for the password, and the password we created before was PWD uppercase N I KKI. And now we're into the system as Nikki. Now when we get into the system, we want to know what database we have in the system, or what database that I have that I can create tables in. So to see my database, we're going to go back and use the show databases command. And inside of my database, I only have information schema, performance schema. So if you take a look at this database, it's quite a bit different from the root database. If you go back in the video, the root database had a MySQL database, and they also had a sys database. So we don't have the MySQL database and the sys database because we are a user. We're not the owner of the system. So let's create a database on the Nikki. We're going to run the command to create the database, but we're going to get an error when we run that specific command. So let's run the command first, and we're going to take a look at the error, and after I'm going to explain why we got the error. So I'm going to say create database test, and I'm going to hit enter. Let's take a look at the error that we're getting. It says access denied for user Nikki to database test. So that means that we don't have permission to create anything inside of the database. And to get permission to create anything, the root user, which should be you, because you logged in as root as well. So the root user have to grant certain permission to Nikki, so Nikki can create database, create table, delete database, work on servers, start sessions. So there are a lot of things that you need access to, and you can't because the root user or the DBA have to grant you certain privilege or permissions. So if we go back and we run show databases, we still have the two databases that we had before we run the command. So what we have to do, we have to exit out and log in as root and grant some permissions to Nikki. So we're going to exit So let's clear the screen, and now let's log back in as root and our password, and now we're in as the root user. So permissions and privilege. Permission and privilege determines what a user can and cannot do on the system. As a DBA, you have the authority to grant certain permissions or privilege to new users. To grant privilege to the new users or to any user on the system, you must use the grant command. We can see here we have several privileges that a user can get. So we have all, alter, create, we also have delete, drop, we have event, we have execute, we have file, we have index, we have insert. So we have a ton of privileges that you can grant a user so they can do certain things on the system. So to use the grant privilege, you say grant, and you want to grant, let's grant all privileges. And grant all privilege is one of the worst option you can choose. You'd never want to give a user all the privileges to do stuff on the system. You want to only select a certain privileges or a certain permission to users. So granting all is a very dangerous privilege to give to any user at all as a DBA. So you have to be very careful of the grant all privileges. So I'm going to use the grant all privilege just for this tutorial, but later on we're going to revoke that privilege and grant just certain privilege to the user Nikki. So for now, let's grant all on, and we're going to grant it on the database we just created. So the database we just created was test, and we're going to say dot star, and we want to grant it to the user, and the user in this case is Nikki. So this is our grant privilege. We hit enter, everything runs okay. So let's exit out as the root user and let's go back in as Nikki, and we're going to enter the password for Nikki. So now let's try to create the database. So we're going to say create database, and we're going to call this database test. So we're going to say show databases, and now we have the test database in our system. Once we have the test database, in order for you to use the database, you can say use and the name of the database. So now database change, we can do everything from this database. As I said before, this is not the best way to do it, so let's go back and take away all this privilege from Nikki. We're going to exit, we're going to go in as root and revoke or remove all those privileges from Nikki. So I'm going to clear my screen, I'm going to log back in as root, and then now I'm going to use the revoke all privilege query, and the revoke all privilege query will remove all the privilege from Nikki. So to remove it, we're going to say revoke all privileges, and we want to revoke all the privileges on the test database dot star, and we want to revoke the privilege from user Nikki. So revoke all privileges on the test database, and from who we want to revoke the privilege from, Nikki. And we're gonna hit enter. Now everything is successful. So let's go back and log in as Nikki to see if we still have the option to create tables in our database. So we're going to exit, we're going to log back in as Nikki. So let's say create database, and we're going to say create database test 1. So we're testing to see if we can create databases now, and we do not have access. So we revoke the access from Nikki to create database. So let's exit out and use the proper way to grant privileges to users. So we're going to log back in as root, enter the password, and to grant certain privilege to user, we have to think about why you hired that person. So based on what the person are hired to do, you want to grant privileges to that specific person in that specific department. So we don't want Nikki to lock tables, or we don't want the user to shut down the server. We don't want the user to do specific things on the system. So we want to give Nikki the ability to create database or create tables. So we're going to grant her the create option. We also want her to be able to alter the table or alter the database. We can give her alter options. We also want her to select row from the table. So we're also going to grant select option as well. You also want to give Nikki update option as well, so she can update certain things on the system or update certain things on the table. We want to grant her insert option, so she can insert values into the table. We also want to give her drop and delete option, so delete and drop, and we're going to say on, and we want all of that to be on the test database. If you want the user to do all of those options on every table, you can use star, but because we only want the user to do all of that option on a specific database, which is the test database, we're going to remove the star and we're going to say test. So we want the user to do it only on the test database. And you have to say who you want to grant all that option to. So we want to grant it to, and the user will be Nikki. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and we grant all those options to the user. So now that the user have all of this option, we can exit and then we can log back in as the user. If you want to see all of the privilege that you have on the system, you can use the show grant command. So show grant, and at the top you can see grants for Nikki, and you can see all of the grants that Nikki can use on the system. Let's say your company is hiring 10-15 employees every week. It does not make any sense to run the grant query every time a new user come in to the department. So the best way we can fix that is to use a role. So a role is a named collection of privileges. So what you can do, you can create a role, and the role would let you insert or input all of the privileges you want to give to that user. So every time a new user come into that specific department and they're hired to do the same job as Nikki, then you want to grant them that role instead of writing out that long command. We're going to log back in as root, and then we're going to create a role. So to create a role, we use the create command. So we're going to say create role and the name of the role. So the name of the role we're going to create is going to call dev team, and the role is created. So right now we created a role and we're going to grant certain permission to the dev team. So we're going to use the grant command again. So we're going to say grant, and we want to grant create. We also want to grant alter, select, update, insert, delete, drop, and we want that on test, and we want to give that grant to the dev team. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and the grant has been created. Previously, we had grant some options for Nikki. So in order for us to remove that, we have to revoke all those grants. So we're going to revoke all privileges on test, and we want to remove it from the user Nikki. So we're going to hit enter. Now we revoked all the privileges from Nikki. So if we exit off, let's log back in as Nikki. Let us check the grants. So we're going to use the show grant command, and now you can see we have no grants for Nikki. So let's exit out, go back into root, and grant the role that we just created to Nikki. So we're going to exit, we're going to log back in as root, and then we're going to grant the role to Nikki. So to grant the role, we just have to say grant the name of the role. So the name of the role was dev_team, and we want to grant the dev team role to Nikki. Going to hit enter. Everything is okay. So after you grant the role, you have to set the role for Nikki to use. You don't want to constantly grant the user that role every time they log in. And we're going to use the command So we're going to set the default role. So the default role for Nikki will be dev team. Now let's get out of root Let's go back in as Nikki and let's check our role. And now we have the dev team role. Let's start creating some tables. So in order for us to create any table in our system, we have to create the table in a specific database. So if we go back and we use the show databases command, we have the test database. So let's go ahead and use the test database. And to use the test database, you say use test, and you can see it says database change. So let's go ahead and create a table. So we're going to say create table and the name of the table. So the name of the table would be student, and then inside of the open and closing braces, we're going to list the columns that we're going to give our table with the specific data type. So we want a column name, first name, and first name will hold varchar or varchar 20 characters. We also want last name as well, and last name will also be a varchar and it will hold about 20 characters as well. And we also want a student number. We're going to shorten it and call that column studnum, and that will hold an int of 4 numbers. And we also want a grade, and grade will be an int of 3 numbers. So let's go ahead and hit enter, and we have our table created. To see the table, we can use the command show tables, and we have the student table. You can also use the command describe table, and the describe will give you all the information about the table, including the data types for each column. So we're going to say describe, and we want to describe the student table, and here is the description of our table. So you can see the values in there is null because we did not input any values in the table as of yet. So let's go ahead and load some or put some data in the table. And there are 2 ways to add data to a table. The first way is to use the insert command, and the second way is to use the load data command. You can use it directly from a CSV file. Let us go ahead and input some data into the table by using the load command. Loading data into the table from an Excel file, it does get a little bit hectic, but we are going to complete it. So the first thing you want to do is create a file on your system, and you have to save the file as a CSV file. So let's go ahead, and I'm using a Mac, so I'm going to create a file using numbers. So I'm going to open up numbers, and I'm going to a new document, and I want a blank template. I'm going to click on create, and from there I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to choose this pattern. I'm going to give the columns the exact same name that's inside of the tables in the MySQL database. So we have a first name, and the first name will be done. We have a last name as well, and the last name we're going to give as John, and student number will be 2314, and the grade will be 90. So this is our table. We're going to go ahead and save this table file, and we're going to export as a CSV, and I'm going to click save, and the name will be student file, export into the documents folder. Now I'm going to open up the document folder. I'm going to go into documents, and I have my student file here. Now if I left click, you have to left click on the file, click on get info, and I have the location of the file. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this location, and I want to go inside of my database and paste the location. So we have to use the load data command. So we're going to say load data. You have to use the local command because we are using the file that is local on our machine. The file is not located on the server. It's located on our machine or my machine. So I'm going to say local, and then we want in file, and in single quotes we're going to paste the path for the file, and we're going to do that inside of double quotes. And we also want the name of the file. So the name of the file is student_file.csv, dent_file.csv. We want to put that data into the student table. So into table student. And when you are working with files like this, we're going to come across a lot of errors, and we're going to go through the errors one by one. If I hit enter, we're going to get probably a character error. We're going to get some access denied error because we're loading the file directly from a computer. So there are some grants and access that you need. So we're going to fix the error one by one. Let's look at the first error we're going to get. So the first error we get in is loading local data is disabled. This must be enabled on both client and server. So to fix that, let us look at the show global variable command. So we're going to say show global variables, like we're going to use local underscore in file. So I'm going to hit enter, and you can see that local in file is off. So we're going to turn it on, and to turn it on we're going to use the set global, and we want to say set global local underscore in file equals 1. So we get a next error, and it said access denied. You need at least one of the super or system variable admin privilege to do that. Now let us go and grant the user system variable admin so we can load data into the table. So let us exit and let's clear the screen, and we're going to log in as root, and now we're going to grant system variable admin to Nikki. So we're going to say grant system underscore variables underscore admin on, and we're going to use star dot star, and we want to give it to user Nikki, and one was affected, so we are okay. Now we also want to grant file to Nikki as well. So let's use grant, and we want to grant file on star dot star to Nikki, and then we're going to hit enter. Now everything is okay, because if we go back into here and we look at file can access file access on server host. So Nikki can access file on the server. So let's exit and let's log back in. And now when we log in, we're going to log in as this. So MySQL, and we're going to say -- local, because we want to access the file on our machine locally, not on the server. So we're going to say in file and equals to 1, which 1 will be true, 0 is false, 1 is true, and we're going to say -u Nikki -p. So we log in as this because we want to access the file locally. We want to turn on local in file. So we turn it on, and if you want to turn it off, you're going to put local in file equals to 0. Enter a password. So now let's go back and load the file properly. So when you get back into your system, we're going to use the database. So we're going to say use test, and now we inside of the test database, so you can see the database has changed. So let's go ahead and load some data inside of the student table. Load data local in file, and we want the path for the file. So let's grab the path for the file. So we're going to copy it, and let's go ahead and paste, and the name of the file is student_file.csv, and then we want it into table student. And when we're loading data into the file, there is something called a character set. So the character set will be Latin 1. If you don't put the character set, you may get an error for UFT8 MB. or MBA, I think is the error. So let's put the character set to Latin 1. And we also want a field terminator. So our field terminated by a colon. We also want to enclosed by double quotes and lines terminated by \r. For some operating system, it will be different. Some operating system have \n, \rr, or \rn. I'm going to use \r, and we want to ignore 2 lines. So let's hit enter. And it says load data disable must be enabled on both client and server. So when we get that error, that means we have to set the file. So let's go back to set global inline. So we're going to say set global, and we want local underscore in file equals 1. Query's okay. Now let's go ahead and run the query again, and we have 1 row inputted into the file. So let's go again and select everything from the table. So we're going to say select star from student. That's our table name. And we have some null values in here. So let's delete the data, and we're going to put the lines starting at ignore line 1 instead of line 2, because here we have 1, 2. We have 1 set of data in there. So we're going to go back and delete the data. So we're going to say delete from student, and now it's deleted. So if we run the select star again, the table is empty. We're going to go back and run the query, but this time instead of ignoring 2 lines, we're going to ignore 1 line because we only have 1 set of data in the file. So we're going to hit enter. So let's go back and do select star from student, and we have our data. Now if I pull up the table, you can see on the same side we have the same data. We have Don, John, 2, 3, 1, 4, and 90. So that's how you would load data from a file into the SQL database. Now I purposely went through all of the errors just so we can walk through the errors together. That is very important when you are learning programming. You have to know how to debug certain things. By going through the errors, you will learn and maintain or retain the information that I'm using. Now, in the beginning of the video, I told you we are going to get some errors and we are going to fix them together. Now, that's the most important thing of being a programmer. You have to know how to debug. Now, the next way to put data into your file is by using the insert command. We're going to say insert into, and the table name is student values. So inside of the brackets, we're going to give our values. So the first name would be Paul, the last name will be James, the student number for James will be 5678, and the grade for James. So this is the data we're going to input into the student table. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter. Now we have our data in the table. So we're going to say select star from student, and we enter, and we have our data. We have Don and we have Paul. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do find this video informative, if you did learn something from this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and leave comments. The comments keeps me going. The comments give me that energy to keep making those type of programming videos for you guys. So thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.